This is a demo of Colossus, our NBA lineup optimizer on Daily Fantasy Cafe. As you can see, our selected site is on DraftKings and our sport is NBA. Below that, you'll see our filter bar, which is really a filter for all players. So if you're on all players, then all the players will show in the table below. If you click on PG for point guard, only point guards will display and so forth. We also have a utility position for DraftKings, and as you switch in between sites, you'll see roster positions update and change according to that site. So these are the roster positions, and this is the number of positions for that roster on that particular site. So I'm going to go back to DraftKings. You can see the Exclude tab, which already has 51 in it, a Lock tab, and injuries. The reason the Exclude tab has 51 to start is that we automatically exclude injuries, default to on. So what you can do if you don't want to exclude all injuries is you can change that to no, and you will have no injuries defaulting to exclude upon startup. You can also take out individual injured players that you don't want excluded by just clicking on the X. So I'm going to walk you through our filters and advanced options. You can also search by letters. So you could search by a team acronym if you wanted, BKN. It would pull up all the Brooklyn players that are either playing on Brooklyn or playing against Brooklyn. You can also just search by name and it will pull up all names that include these letters. So we also have a number of lineups that you can generate here with a drop down, and you can click the button up here. But we're going to walk through the filters, and you can see there's a tooltip next to each section which you can hover over for information about that particular option. You can click the plus sign or filters to expand and then collapse. So the first thing is you can filter by team total. This is from Vegas. So if you only want to target high scoring teams, you can filter accordingly. As you filter, you'll notice that your excludes update automatically up above, and you can just see that number change. Same thing with lowest player minutes to include. If you don't want players that don't get minutes and you only want to go for 27 and above, slide that slider, or you can just change this, press return, and that will also update the slider and update your excludes. Same thing for filter by salary. Maybe you're only looking for a particular player with a particular salary. You can change that by using the slider or by editing the text boxes here. Down below, you'll see the filter by teams. You'll see the game time. You'll see the game over under. You'll see the team total under each logo. And you can actually exclude an entire time, so an entire group of games. If you want to exclude all games at 7 p.m., simply click that time. All the logos will gray out and your excludes will update accordingly. You can click it again to bring them back. You can also click on individual team icons, and that will exclude all the players of that particular team. So lots of ways to filter down the results that you're looking for. Below that, you have advanced options. Maximum number of players per team in each lineup. This defaults to off, but let's say you did want more than one player potentially in the lineup. You could update this, and you could also specify the count of the players that you want from that particular team. So if you said on with 2 players, then you would give Colossus the option of including up to 2 players from one particular team. If it's not optimal, it won't include them. So it's just providing Colossus with the option. We also have a lock flex position option. If you designate it to off, which is by default, it defaults to off, then it will allow Colossus to pull the most optimal position for the flex or the utility. Or you can specify it. If you really like point guards for this particular slate, or centers, or whatever the reason, you can specify that. If you turn on individual exposure, down below in the table, you'll see the exposure column become available. Exposure without a player lock tells Colossus that Colossus can include this player up to 50% of the time if it deems it optimal. Now, if you were to lock this player, you'll see it defaults to 0, and then you need to update it, and you said 50% exposure there. You're telling Colossus that this player is locked in at 50% exposure. So if you generated 100 lineups, this player would be in 50 lineups, or 50% of your lineups guaranteed. You're forcing it regardless of whether it's optimal or not. So individual player exposure is really powerful. Definitely something to take a look at, especially if you're looking at multi-entries to decrease risk. Along those same lines, you can do global player exposure. And what this will do is it will tell Colossus not to include a player this percentage or less, or this percentage or more. So if you set global exposure to 25%, no one player would be in your lineups more than 25% of the time. So this, once again, can really help mitigate risk, especially if you're going for multi-entries. You may have seen this called diversity in other areas or other optimizers. It's a way to diversify your lineups and ensure that you're not super heavy on one player, he gets injured, and you lose your slate. So you can also upload your own custom projections. We have custom projections here, or the ability to add or edit custom projections. So if I wanted Caron Butler to have 25 points, just enter 25 and press return or click outside the box, and it's updated. And Colossus will now calculate lineups based on that override of your projections. If you want to do it on a mass scale, click the upload projection button. Once again, select your site. We'd go with NBA, and I'll show you in a second, but you can also mass upload your minutes. But you just follow these steps. You save the player file, you upload your own file after you've updated the projections, and then you click override our values, and you'll get confirmation here. And then you go back to the optimizer and you'll see the updated projections. So like I said, you can also upload minutes, same concept. You're basically overriding the minutes column on a mass scale. You can also do this manually, one by one. If you think Harden's going to go into overtime, 45 minutes. What this does is it multiplies the minutes by the fantasy points per minute and gives you a new projection. You can also exclude all players. Some people want to work with a small group of players, so they want to exclude all players off the start, and then they will go in and unexclude those players that they want to work with their player pool. This isn't really using Colossus the way we built it. Colossus is built to provide optimal lineups based on projections, but if you do want to work with a smaller set, just be careful, because if you limit it too much, Colossus may not be able to generate the number of lineups you want, or any lineups. Down below this, we have apply models, which are projection models. These are models that we've built in ourselves. So if you really value Vegas total and you click this box, what it will do is it will update projection according to the Vegas total. And if that player has a higher than average team total, their projection will go up. And if it's a lower team total, their projection will go down. Same thing with fantasy points per game allowed. It takes into effect what the opponent allows per position. So what Portland allows on average to shooting guards, and then it would adjust your projection accordingly. Same thing with defense efficiency rating. This is a rating that basically gauges how tough an opponent is on that particular position. These are reset buttons. So let's say I was playing around with projections and I generated some lineups, but I wanted to go back to the standard lineup or the default. I would just click reset projections. I could do the same thing with minutes, exposure, locks, exclude, or I could do them all at once. Okay, so now that you have an introduction, let's generate some lineups. I'm going to leave it on 25. And down below, just let this spin. It's calculating the most optimal lineups. You'll see this group tab come up again. If I wanted to generate another set of lineups, I could do that. If you change any variable, it will create a new group, and you can name these groups. If you really like a group, or you just want to name them just so you know what's going on, you can just press enter. Down below you can see the name of the lineup, which is DK lineup 1. It'll give you the total projected points, how much salary cap you used, and how much is remaining. Down below you'll see the name, team icon, position, opponent, salary, projection, the exposure that you had, and the cafe value. Down here you can save this lineup, which if you click this, it will go to your saved lineups tab, which is a great way to keep track of all your favorite lineups. And you can also download this lineup to a CSV, or you can download them all or save them all at once. There's also a helpful player use tab, which if you generate multiple tabs, there will be a drop down for each. You can see all the players in your generated lineups with the exposure percentage. You can also see the exposure actual raw number, how many times the player was in the lineups, position, team, opponent, Vegas total, which is the team total, salary projection, and cafe value. So it's a very powerful tool, some of the most advanced options in the industry. Wish you the best of luck.